June 16, 1943, skies over occupied France. Is at 12,000 feet. 31 confirmed victories. 3 years of air combat. Battle of Britain. Engagements over the Channel. Domination in the skies against Spitfires and Hurricanes. He had learned their weaknesses, exploited their limitations, won through superior tactics and a superior aircraft. The 109 was the finest fighter Germany had ever built. Lightweight, agile, responsive. Turning radius than any British fighter. High rate of climb. In turning combat at low altitude, the 109 could outmaneuver everything the Allies had thrown against it for 3 years. At this moment spots a target at 8,000 feet, an American P-47 Thunderbolt. Intelligence reports said, slow, clumsy, built with American brute force lacking the tactical finesse of German design. Had read these reports, he believed them. Every experienced Luftwaffe pilot believed them. He begins his standard attack, climbing for altitude advantage. A 109 at 12,000 feet sees everything below. The American would be at a disadvantage. The American would have to react to his position. The P-47 does not try to climb. It dives. This violates everything understood about air combat. A fighter that surrenders altitude surrenders control of the engagement. In 3 years of combat sorties, had never seen a pilot willingly dive away from a superior position. He pushes his 109 into a dive to follow. He expects to catch the American, close the gap, enter gun range. The distance widens. The P-47 accelerates, 350 miles per hour, 400, 450, it continues diving. The gap continues growing, pushes harder, the stick becomes heavier. The fuselage begins to shake. At 480 miles per hour in a dive, the 109 reaches its limit. Aerodynamic forces become too great. Wings begin to vibrate. The fuselage groans under the load. Continue diving and the aircraft will come apart. Must pull out. He has reached the physical limit of his aircraft. The P-47 continues diving, 500 miles per hour, 520. The American pilot is comfortable at speeds that would tear his wing clean off. At the bottom of the dive, the impossible happens. The P-47 recovers from the dive, smoothly, fluidly. The massive fighter pulls out at 520 miles per hour without structural failure, without wing failure. The aircraft simply climbs away. At high speed in a climb, the P-47 is unstoppable, watches his opponent disappear above him. The engagement lasted 90 seconds from first contact to final separation. 90 seconds. In that time, had never fired a single shot. He had never achieved a position of advantage. He had never been in control. The American had controlled the entire fight, using nothing but the physics of his aircraft. Understood something in that moment that terrified him. The moment the P-47 pilot pushed that control stick forward and dove, the fight was over. There was no tactic could employ, no maneuver, no trick. The 109 could not follow the P-47 in a dive. Once the American dove had lost. He flew back to his airfield in silence. His wingman asked what happened. Did not answer. He could not explain how he had been so completely dominated by an aircraft that was supposed to be inferior. German air tactics for the entire war had been built on a single principle, achieving superior turning circle. The 109 could outturn the Spitfire. It could definitely outturn the massive P-47. Any experienced German pilot knew this. In sustained turning combat at low altitude, the P-47 would lose. It was simple geometry. Turning requires energy. Energy means speed. The P-47 had speed reserves that the 109 could never match at high altitude. The problem was not tactical. The problem was mathematical. The P-47 was powered by the Whitney R-2800 double Wasp 2,000 horsepower at sea level. The engine included a revolutionary turbo supercharger that allowed it to maintain that power all the way up to 30,000 feet. Above 30,000 feet, the air becomes so thin that ordinary engines gasp for oxygen. Their power drops dramatically. The P-47's turbo supercharger used the engine's own exhaust to spin a compressor. This compressed the thin air back into density the engine could use. At 20,000 feet, at 25,000 feet, at 30,000 feet, the P-47 was just hitting its stride. Above 30,000 feet, where the air is so thin that the 109 loses power, the P-47 dominated absolutely. The 109 used the DB605 engine. A powerful engine, a reliable engine, producing 1,475 horsepower under perfect conditions when fuel quality was perfect. Fuel quality was no longer perfect. By 1943, German fuel production had become catastrophic. The refineries were being bombed. The synthetic fuel plants were being sabotaged by slave laborers. The fuel reaching German fighters was contaminated, degraded. It was poisoning the engines. The DB605, rated for 1,475 horsepower, was producing 1,200 horsepower on average, sometimes less. German pilots were flying aircraft operating at 80% power when they needed 100% power. The P-47's R-2800 was producing 2,000 horsepower standard. With water injection for temporary boost, it reached 2,800 horsepower. The gap was not 200 horsepower. The gap was 800 horsepower, 1,000 horsepower, 1,600 horsepower with water injection. The gap was not a difference in aircraft design. The gap was two different wars. Wrote in his combat report that he could not engage the P-47 in any configuration. In a climb, the P-47 climbed faster. In a dive, the P-47 dived faster. In a turn, the P-47 had superior energy retention. The only viable tactic was to avoid engagement or accept defeat. His superiors dismissed the report. They said he was being pessimistic. They said German pilots had beaten worse odds. They said that courage and tactical training overcome material disadvantage. They said the P-47 was overrated. Knew they were wrong. He knew this was no longer a question of courage. This was a question of physics. Physics does not negotiate. German engineers could design a better engine. That was not the problem. The problem was manufacturing it. The plant in Stuttgart was under constant bombing. In a single month, 200 tons of bombs fell on the facility. Workers rebuilt. The Allies bombed again. Production halted, restarted, halted again. Between August 1943 and May 1944, Stuttgart received 47 separate bombing raids. Each raid dropped 500 to 1,000 tons of bombs. The factories were rebuilt 17 times. By May 1944, production had dropped to 60 aircraft engines per month. In May 1942, the same plant had produced 800 engines per month. The plant in was damaged. The plant in Wiener was damaged. Every facility that could produce high-performance engines was under attack. The Allies had systematically destroyed Germany's ability to manufacture powerful engines, while simultaneously building more engines in America than Germany could destroy. And Whitney produced 125,000 R-2800 engines between 1940 and 1945. 125,000 engines. Each producing 2,000 horsepower standard. Each built in factories that were never bombed. Factories in Connecticut, factories in Kansas, factories in Canada producing engines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. German aviation industry was producing 800 engines per month before the bombing. After the bombing, production fell to 60 engines per month. American industry was producing 2,500 engines per month, then 3,000 engines per month, then 4,000 engines per month. The mathematics were unbearable. The gap did not just exist, it widened every month. The Luftwaffe attempted to modernize the 109. They introduced the 109G variant. It had a more powerful engine, a pressurized cabin so pilots could fly higher where thin air favored the German design philosophy. The 109G could climb to 23,000 feet, higher than the original 109F. Every modification added weight, armor plating to protect the pilot, larger fuel tank for range, stronger landing gear to handle the additional mass. The 109G was faster than the 109F by 20 miles per hour. It was heavier, less agile, more sluggish in the turn. Pilots complained. The aircraft no longer felt like a 109. It felt like a compromise. The P-47 was being continuously upgraded. The original Razorback design was replaced with a bubble canopy that gave pilots unobstructed 360 visibility. The original propeller was replaced with a paddle blade design that bit into the air more effectively. Takeoff performance improved. Acceleration improved. Climb rate improved. Each generation of P-47 was demonstrably better than the last. The gap was not closing, it was widening. Every month the gap widened. Every new P-47 variant that arrived in Europe was superior to the German response. Germany was always one step behind, always playing catch-up, always losing ground. Over the next 6 months, flew 47 combat missions against P-47s. He achieved 3 confirmed kills, 4 confirmed damage reports. He lost 8 wingmen. 8 pilots under his command, who died in combat with American fighters. His kill-to-loss ratio against P-47s was 0.37 to 1, 0.37, confirmed kills for every confirmed loss. Against Spitfires, his ratio had been 3.2 to 1. He was 8 times less effective against P-47s than against Spitfires. This was not because American pilots were 8 times better. This was because the P-47 system was 8 times superior. Began to understand that the war had changed. The age of the individual ace was over. It no longer mattered who was the best pilot. It mattered which side built better systems, which side could replace losses faster. Germany could replace damaged aircraft. Germany could rebuild factories. Germany could not replace the pilots. An American pilot received 300 flight hours of training before seeing combat. A German pilot in 1943 received 120 hours, sometimes less. The American training pipeline was producing 50 new fighter pilots per month, 50 fully trained replacements ready for deployment. Germany in 1943 was producing 20 pilots per month, sometimes fewer. These pilots arrived with half the flight hours of their American counterparts. Every German pilot lost in combat was irreplaceable. Every American pilot lost in combat was replaced from a reservoir of 200,000 trained pilots waiting for deployment. The pipeline was infinite. The German pipeline was empty. The mathematics were impossible to overcome. Flew every day. He saw the skies changing. Every week more P-47s appeared over France. Every week fewer 109s rose to meet them. The force ratio changed not because the Americans were better pilots. The force ratio changed because the American system was producing aircraft and pilots faster than Germany could destroy them. Understood something fundamental during this period. Courage could not overcome the system. Skill could not overcome production. Individual superiority could not overcome organizational superiority. He flew with increasingly younger pilots, 19 years old, 18 years old. Some barely had 100 hours of flight time. They arrived at the front inexperienced, untrained, unprepared. They died within the first 3 sorties. They were replaced by other young pilots with equally insufficient training hours. The system was collapsing from within, not because German pilots were cowards, not because they were inferior. The system was collapsing because the opposing system was so much larger, so much more powerful, that individual heroism became irrelevant. Observe this unfolding daily. More P-47s in the sky. Fewer 109s, more American pilots with full training, fewer German pilots with adequate skills. The numbers did not lie. The P-47 system produced more, trained better, replaced faster. The 109 system collapsed under the weight of attrition warfare it could not sustain. The 109 remained a superior aircraft in one dimension, the turn. Lighter, more agile, more responsive. Superiority in one dimension does not matter when your opponent has superiority in 5 dimensions. Speed, the P-47 was faster at sea level, faster at 10,000 feet, faster at 20,000 feet, much faster at 30,000 feet. Climb rate, the P climbed faster above 15,000 feet, where the turbo supercharger gave it an insurmountable advantage. Dive speed. The P-47 could dive at 550 miles per hour without structural failure. The 109 began to come apart at 390 miles per hour. Energy retention. The P-47 retained energy better in any maneuver due to weight and engine power. Firepower. The P-47 carried 8.50 caliber machine guns versus 220 cannons on the 109. The P-47's fire density was overwhelming at distances beyond 300 meters. 5 dimensions against 1. The mathematics were ruthless. The P-47 was not the most beautifully designed fighter of the war. The P-47 was part of a system, a training system that produced 200,000 pilots, a production system that built 15,600 P-47s between 1941 and 1945. An engine production system that built 125,000 and Whitney R-2800 engines, not just for the P-47, but for other American aircraft as well. The P-47 was the steel-tipped spear of a juggernaut that ground the Luftwaffe into dust through sheer, relentless attrition. The 109 was a magnificent aircraft, beautifully designed, responsive, a pilot's aircraft in every sense. Magnitude of design could not compete with magnitude of production. By May 1945, when was captured, the Luftwaffe had ceased to exist as a fighting force, not because the pilots had lost their courage. The system that opposed them had overwhelmed them completely. The P-47 Thunderbolt ended the war with an official kill-to-loss ratio of over 4-to-1. Having flown over 500,000 missions, destroying thousands of enemy aircraft and tens of thousands of vehicles. The aircraft that German pilots had mocked as a flying milk bottle became the instrument of their complete and total defeat. By 1945, had accumulated 87 confirmed kills. He was decorated, respected. He had stopped being optimistic about the future of the Luftwaffe. He understood something that his superiors refused to accept. The Luftwaffe had not lost air superiority to better pilots. It had lost air superiority because every day more P-47s appeared in the sky and fewer 109s rose to meet them. The American system was producing aircraft and pilots faster than Germany could destroy them. Once you lose control of the system, no amount of individual courage can restore it. Survived the war. He was captured by American forces in May 1945. He spent 2 years in a prisoner of war camp. He was released in 1947. He died in civilian life in 1982, convinced of one thing: the war was not lost to better pilots. The war was lost to better systems. The Americans did not beat the Luftwaffe by being more tactically brilliant, not by outmaneuvering them, not by superior leadership. The Americans beat the Luftwaffe by building more aircraft, training more pilots, producing more engines, creating a system so vast and so powerful that the Luftwaffe simply could not survive within it. Individual courage became irrelevant against the mathematics of production. The story of, and the P-47 is the story of how air superiority shifted from being determined by individual skill to being determined by system superiority. The lesson that learned too late defined every conflict for the next century. Courage cannot defeat systems. Skill cannot defeat production. Individual excellence cannot overcome organizational superiority. The sky over Europe did not belong to the best aces. It belonged to the side that built the best system. German pilots were not cowards. They were not inferior. They were simply fighting against a system so much larger and more powerful than anything they could match, that individual heroism became irrelevant. This lesson resonates beyond air combat of 1943. It speaks to a fundamental truth of conflict in the industrial age. Systems defeat individuality, organization defeats heroism, production defeats skill. This does not mean courage is meaningless. This does not mean individual excellence does not matter. This means courage and skill operate within systems. When the system collapses, when organizational structure cannot support the individual excellence becomes insufficient. was an outstanding pilot, 87 confirmed kills, 3 years of combat experience, tactical brilliance recognized even by his enemies. All of this did not matter against a system that produced 7 times more aircraft, trained twice as many pilots, built 10 times more engines. The war demonstrated that conflict between industrial powers is not determined by individual heroism. It is determined by organizational capacity, the capacity to produce, the capacity to train, the capacity to replace losses faster than the enemy can inflict them. The P-47 was not just an aircraft. The P-47 was a manifestation of a system that could build 15,600 fighters, a system that could train 200,000 pilots, a system that could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. Against such a system, individual courage was insufficient. Against such a system, tactical brilliance was insufficient. Against such a system, even superior aircraft design was insufficient. The lesson is direct. In conflicts between industrial powers, systems always defeat individuality. Organization always defeats heroism. Production always defeats skill. Understood this too late to change the outcome. He understood it clearly enough to carry this understanding until the end of his life. The sky over Europe did not belong to the best pilots. It belonged to the best system. Thanks for watching. If this story showed you how systems defeat individuality, please like and subscribe for new World War II stories that most people don't know. We explore history through the lens of those who lived it. German pilots discovering that superior tactics cannot defeat superior engines. Japanese officers realizing that tactical excellence means nothing against industrial supremacy. American soldiers understanding that wars are won in factories, not on battlefields. Write in the comments, what other forgotten air battles would you like to see? Where are you watching from today? Your support helps tell these untold stories. Thanks for watching.